Welcome and thank you for standing by. Today's call is being recorded. If you have any objections, you may disconnect at this time. All participants are in listen-only mode until the question and answer session of today's conference. At that time, you may press star 1 to ask a question. I would now like to turn the conference over to Stephanie Shearholtz. You may begin.
Great, thank you. Good morning. I'm Stephanie Shearholtz from NASA's Office of Communications. NASA and Axiom Space have signed a mission order for the first private astronaut mission to the International Space Station that will launch no earlier than January 2022. Thank you for joining us today to learn more about this mission. We also have a news release that should be out shortly online on nasa.gov. Here to talk with us today are Phil McAlister, the Director of Commercial Spaceflight Development here at NASA headquarters, Angela Hart, Manager, Commercial Low Earth Orbit Development at NASA's Johnson Space Center, Dana Weigel, Deputy Manager of the International Space Station Program at NASA's Johnson Space Center, Michael Suffredini, President and CEO of Axiom Space, and Michael López-Alegría, Vice President and AX-1 Commander at Axiom Space. Our speakers will each share brief opening remarks, then we will open the lines for questions. You may enter the queue to ask a question at any time by pressing star 1 on your phone. To remove yourself from the queue, press star 2. We ask that you please stick to one question and identify to whom you are addressing your question. We have a lot of reporters on the line today, and we want to be able to get to everybody. Also, we're here to talk about the first private astronaut mission to the International Space Station, so please keep your questions focused on today's topic. About 1 hour after we conclude, you can listen to a replay of this teleconference by dialing 203-369-3391. Again, that number is 203-369-3391. So to start, we will hear from Phil McAlister, our Director of Commercial Spaceflight Development at NASA. Over to you, Phil.
Thanks, Stephanie. Welcome, everybody. Happy that you've taken some time to follow us along. This is a really interesting mission, so I'm not surprised we've got a lot of interest. And we're here to announce another first in U.S. human spaceflight. This will be the first private astronaut mission. We're calling it AX-1 to the International Space Station. We've had a lot of firsts recently in U.S. human spaceflight. If you think about it, the last shuttle flight ended in 2011. And we went 10 years without almost 10 years without a U.S. human space flight. There was a lot of hard work in that 10 years, and we've really accomplished a turnaround. If you think about it, in just less than a year after that dearth of missions, after the shuttle landed, in less than a year we've had 3 U.S. crewed launches to the ISS, 2 landings. Last week, Blue Origin announced that they were offering suborbital rides. Virgin Galactic, we hope to see them operational sometime soon. Inspiration 4 should be happening before the end of the year. Hopefully we'll get Boeing certified, and now this AX-1 mission in the early part of next year. This truly is a renaissance in U.S. human spaceflight. I think that's the perfect word for what we're experiencing. And, you know, a lot of times history can feel incremental when you're in it, but I really feel like we are in it this year. This is a real inflection point, I think, with human spaceflight. I'm very bullish on the tourism market and the tourism activity. I think more people that are going to fly, they're going to want to do more things in space. The more things they want to do, that will attract more people, more doing. I just see it as a real synergistic activity. And it's just what we envisioned for the Commercial Crew Program when we embarked on that about 10 years ago. So I want to focus today now more on this first PAM mission. I do want to mention, since it is the first and we've never done this before, we are going to learn as we go. I'm sure we're going to have some hiccups and we're going to have to make some adjustments and some lessons learned. We have already learned a lot just through the negotiation process with Axiom and trying to get our plans all squared away. But I think with the signing of this mission order, we've achieved a pretty significant milestone. This is Axiom's mission. I think it is unique because NASA is partnering with Axiom, and we are focused mostly on the ISS. but Axiom's doing all the heavy lifting, and it's really their mission. I have to say, Axiom we're always looking for good partners in our commercial endeavors, and Axiom certainly has been a very good partner. We have an alignment of goals, which I think is the most important thing when we're looking for partners from the private sector. Both Axiom and NASA are focused on a truly sustainable and operational low Earth orbit economy where NASA is one of many users. And I think this mission will facilitate that vision as we go forward. That's it, and I will turn it over to my colleagues.
Great, thank you, Phil. Next, we will hear from Angela Hart, our manager of the Commercial Low Earth Orbit Development Program at NASA's Johnson Space Center. Angela.
Hey, good morning. Yes, myself and my office are extremely excited to be part of this historic mission. Enabling the AX-1 mission is an important next step to stimulate demand for commercial human spaceflight services in LEO, and we expect this will be the first of many as we move forward. As you've heard us talk in the past, enabling both supply and demand is key to our strategy to support commercial LEO economy needed to ensure NASA's needs for the future are met. And so we are extremely excited to be working with both the ISS program and Axiom to make this happen. And I'm really looking forward to your questions and moving on with mission planning with the ISS program. And with that, I'm going to hand it over to Dana.
All right, thank you, Angela. Let's see, over the last 5 years, NASA has been very focused on leveraging Station as a platform for building commercial opportunities and capabilities. As an example, we've enabled commercial and marketing activities on board ISS. We've offered a port for commercial use, and we've worked to move some of our government-managed work from NASA out to industry. And with our U.S. commercial crew vehicles now flying, we're finally able to open our doors to private citizens and allow others to experience the magic of living and working in space. And the dream is really to allow everyone access to space, and this is a pretty exciting starting point here. Our ability to allow private astronaut missions to Station brings with it unprecedented opportunity. Think back to the moon landing in the 60s, it inspired a whole generation of scientists and engineers. And right now, I really do believe we have a similar opportunity in front of us to inspire future generations. Who knows what innovations and creative ideas will arise now that we're able to finally share our mission with industry and private citizens who want to visit the station. And this isn't just about tourism. There are many private professionals who are passionate about the betterment of mankind and who would like to do research and STEM activities on board Station. In the past, American private citizens who wanted to fly to space had to do so aboard a Russian Soyuz, and they had very limited access to the U.S. segment on board, and they were primarily staying on the Russian segment. These PAMs are quite a bit different because in this case our private astronauts will be living and working in the U.S. segment. The framework itself for PAMs is heavily focused on Station, as Phil mentioned. It's different from what we do for our NASA U.S. crewed vehicles. The launch, the free flight, and landing are in industry and FAA's hands. But for ISS, the PAMs do have required training, medical screening, and other activities that are needed to integrate the PAM into the ISS mission. We are confident in our ability to handle the additional crew members. In fact, a little over a week ago on orbit, we had 11 crew members up there as we were doing our direct crew handover between the Crew 1 and the Crew 2 mission. So the vehicle and spacecraft are able to handle the additional crew. So I'm thrilled Space Station is in a position to enable this opportunity, and now that we've signed the contract with Axiom, we're looking forward to starting the work to plan the integrated mission. And with that, I will hand it over to Mike Suffredini.
Thanks, Dana. And for those of you who are listening, when our speakers say PAM, they are referring to Private Astronaut Mission. And so now we'll go over to Axiom Space to President and Chief Executive Officer Michael Suffredini.
Thank you. Good morning, everyone. It's a pleasure to be here today. I think Phil and others have mentioned the amount of work it's taken to get to where we are today, to have signed a contract with NASA to be able to fly to ISS. For Axiom, we hate to overuse the term historic, but several years ago, back in 2015, it was made clear that the U.S. government and likely the partners would not build the next low Earth orbit platform. And with that thought in mind, Dr. Cam Gafarian and I put Axiom in place specifically to make sure that the LEO economy that is built between now and when the ISS retires will continue to grow once it's retired. And so for us, this is a tremendous first step. It's these flights for us represent, if you will, stepping stones towards operating our own space station, both with NASA while we're attached, and then later when we separate upon retirement of the International Space Station. So this specific mission, of course, is historic in its own right. The first flight to the International's first fully commercial mission to the International Space Station. This for us as a flights really is a great way to start. The individuals involved, it's a multi-lateral crew, multinational crew. Each of the individuals are very focused on their philanthropic efforts and have worked closely in their countries to help develop research and other activities to further causes that are good for their countries and really good for humanity as a whole. And so we're very excited to have this first flight be so significant. But for us, as I mentioned earlier, this really is the beginning of a number of flights that really leads to the ultimate goal of having a commercially available low Earth orbit platform to not only help grow the LEO economy, but to be able to serve all humanity in being able to explore and utilize low Earth orbit and space in general. So this is an exciting day for us as a country. I think it's an exciting day for our country, and really globally, it's a tremendous step forward. Before I turn it over to Mike, I really have got to thank my NASA colleagues. Of course, I spent a lot of time at NASA, as you guys mostly know, and to make this step to try to create a process where commercial companies can do what they need to do within the framework of a government-owned and operated space station you just cannot imagine how challenging that is. And so our thanks go out to NASA and to SpaceX for working so closely with us to try to sort through the arrangements so that we could find a way to do this, to keep the station safe, the crew safe, and ensure the success and safety of our mission. So with that, I'll hand it over to Mike López-Alegría, our commander.
Thanks, Steph. Good morning, everybody, and thank you all for joining the call. We're honestly very appreciative of your interest. I'd like to start by emphasizing the obvious, and that is that it's a huge privilege for me to be commanding this, I'll say it, historic first fully private mission to the ISS. I think some of you know that I've been evangelizing about the democratization of human spaceflight for a number of years. And so to be able to play this role at this pivotal moment of that process is truly an honor for me. My enthusiasm for expanding human spaceflight to non-professionals started back in 2006 when I flew with one. That was Anusha Ansari. And I'll admit that I was less than keen at the idea at first, but her complete professionalism during training and the mission itself, and most importantly, her outreach to everyday people who otherwise wouldn't have been at all interested in what was going on aboard the ISS, opened up my mind to opening up space to others like her. I will tell you that the AX-1 crew has its work cut out for it. We acknowledge the responsibility of setting the bar for future private missions, and we embrace that challenge. Eitan, Larry, and Mark are very serious individuals who are dedicated to being the best they can be in the mold of a NASA astronaut. And they're not interested in being tourists. They want to do their part to improve humankind, and are looking forward to doing meaningful work on the ISS through scientific experimentation and outreach to educational and philanthropic organizations. And I think the pedigree of those organizations, in collaboration with which they'll be conducting their research, such as the Cleveland and Mayo Clinics, the Ramon Foundation, and the Montreal Children's Hospital, speaks for itself. Because of the pandemic, we've been together just a handful of times, but we'll be starting what I would call serious training next week with a zero-G parabolic flight and centrifuge training. And from there, the pace will pick up, and we'll all be immersed essentially full-time in ISS systems and Crew Dragon training starting in the fall. I also want to echo Mike's thanks to our partners at NASA. It's been a learning process for all of us. But as evidenced by us being together today on this occasion, we are getting there, and it's been a very interesting and positive journey so far. And thanks to you all again for joining the call, and I look forward to answering any of your questions. I think it's back to you, Steph.
Great. Thank you all for those remarks. We will now take questions about the AX-1 mission. Please remember to identify to whom you are addressing your question, and please do stick to one question about our topic today. Again, to ask a question, press *1. If your question was already asked, you can remove yourself from the queue by pressing *2. So let's get started. Our first question is from Michael Sheets of CNBC.
Hi, all. Great to talk to you, and congratulations on the signing this agreement. Obviously, a step forward for AX-1 happening in January. I'm curious to hear first and foremost from Axiom on their confidence in this January 2020 date. Obviously, you know, we're not quite out of the pandemic yet, but there are still some moving pieces. Do you know which Crew Dragon spacecraft you're going to be flying on, and how that fits in the overall schedule? And then my second question would then be for the NASA side of things. I know there's a transfer of services here. Is this an equivalent value of transfer and services? Thank you.
So, Michael, let me answer your question, the Axiom question first. So the Axiom team actually is very experienced. We have a number of individuals that have worked in human spaceflight for some time, and so we understand what it takes to get to orbit and back safely and be productive on orbit. So we can tell you that we have all the things that we have to put together, we have in place and are moving forward on a schedule that has margin. So we have a high degree of confidence in the late January date. As far as which Crew Dragon will fly, it really depends on when the missions occur. So it's possible we could be the Crew 2 mission, Crew 2 vehicle, but really just depends on how things work out going forward. So really the great thing about SpaceX is any one of the spacecraft will work, so they can line up which one will be ready soonest for us, and that the decision on the specific spacecraft hasn't been decided yet.
Thanks, Michael. And I think we'll have Angela Hart answer the question about the contract.
Yes, the current dollar value of the mission order is $1.69 million and is based on the services that NASA and Axiom have agreed to and is consistent with the 2019 pricing policy. Axiom is obtaining services from NASA such as crew supplies, cargo delivery to space, storage, and on-orbit resources for daily use. NASA is purchasing cold storage return capability from Axiom to return scientific samples to researchers on the ground. However, there are a multitude of other additional reimbursable Space Act agreements that Axiom and SpaceX have with NASA that have other contract values, agreement values. Those include training services as well as launch services at the Cape and other items that we're still negotiating. So that is not the full value of all the services that Axiom is responsible for.
And just one clarification, the number that Angela gave you, 1.69, that is the net that NASA is paying Axiom for all the resources that she mentioned, but it doesn't include, like she said, a bunch of other reimbursable agreements that Axiom has put in place for other ground services.
Okay, great. Thank you. Our next question comes from Bill Harwood of CBS News.
Follow up on that a little bit. I was looking through the recently modified pricing schedule, I guess I'll call it, for commercial crew flights to station. I'm confused about who pays what, how much. I know on that chart I saw, you know, they're talking about basic services, ISS crew time. Those two together, it lists as $10 million per mission, which I assume a commercial crew pays to NASA. Then on top of that, incidentals for food and other things. Can you guys just talk about what's being covered here and what's not, or what remains to be negotiated? Because I don't understand who pays who, how much. Thanks.
Hey, Bill. Good morning. It's been a while. I'll take a shot at that, and then my NASA colleagues can as well. So, of course, when you want to take a crew to orbit, there's a number of things you need to have in place, some of which you can provide, and much of which early on you cannot, so you have to make arrangements for. Of course, the launch, we have to procure the launch vehicle, and so that's an arrangement between us and SpaceX directly in this case. Then when we get to orbit, we have a certain amount of services required. Everything from the work the crew does to configure the vehicle for the docking, as was mentioned, crew supplies, really not so much crew supplies as life support, and then wherever storage is required that we have to pay for, things like that. We, Axiom, have a goal after our third flight, we will provide for all of those kinds of capabilities, but early on, we do some of those. We provide some of the food, we provide all the crew provisions, the clothing, the crew clothes, the crew provisioning, things they require other than food and water. And we get the food and water from NASA, but on subsequent flights, then we'll make arrangements to cover the rest of the resources required on orbit. So in addition to that, we have an opportunity to provide a capability that NASA requires in terms of these cold storage lockers. So there's a arrangement between those two where we have value for what we owe NASA, and we have certain value for what we provide NASA, and it works out to the number that you heard. In addition to that, on the ground, we do all of we collaborate with the company that trains astronauts today, so we do that directly commercially. However, we have reimbursement arrangements with NASA for the training facilities, the ones we have to use. Of course, the ISS training facilities are very unique to ISS, and so we make arrangements to utilize that through an agreement. There are other facilities on the ground that we start off by, through a reimbursement agreement, utilizing NASA facilities, but over time we transition away from NASA facilities. A good example of that is we're making all of our arrangements for crew quarters at the Kennedy Space Center prior to launch. We'll be there a couple weeks before launch to do training and acclimation and be in quarantine, and we're arranging for those facilities, but the day before launch, we likely would utilize NASA facilities, have the crew spend one last night there, and then transport them to SpaceX for suiting. At least that's the idea today. And in that case, we'll have to make arrangements for that. So there's just a number of things, as was mentioned, besides what this agreement discusses, which is the flight up and down the mission itself. There's a number of things we have to do to prepare for the flight, and in some cases we utilize NASA as we figure it out, transition ourselves. In some cases we can already take care of ourselves. Hopefully that helps a little bit.
And just to clarify some of the questions specifically on the pricing policy that you're seeing out on the Leo Economy website. So that is providing a list of the types of services that NASA can provide to a private astronaut mission contractor to give them the ability to evaluate their business case. Oftentimes you're seeing on that table some ranges because that's based on what Mr. Suffredini mentioned in terms of some items that could be provided that they could purchase on the economy, or some items that they could purchase through NASA. It really depends on their mission concept. And so that's what you're seeing is the types of items that we believe they will purchase from NASA and what those costs are. That does not include, as you noted, services that NASA could negotiate and purchase from the private astronaut mission provider.
Okay, thank you, Angela, and thank you, Michael. Our next question comes from Marina Coren from The Atlantic.
Hi, everybody. This is a question for Phil and for Michael López-Alegría. The passengers on this mission are being referred to as astronauts, and Blue Origin, for example, is calling the passengers of its suborbital flights astronauts too. I'm wondering how you feel about the way the definition of an astronaut has changed since you got into this business, and in your opinion, who counts and shouldn't count as an astronaut these days?
Yeah, I would say anybody that goes to space is an astronaut in my mind. We have designations of astronauts, if you want to cut it finely. We have NASA astronauts, just like you have Air Force pilots and civilian pilots and personal pilots. But I see anybody who goes to space, in my mind, is an astronaut, and then if you want to put a sub-designation, you can do that, but that's the way I see it.
Yeah, Marina, thanks for the question. I have to say, I completely agree with Phil. If you go to space, you're an astronaut. There's some argument about where space begins, but I think it's pretty clear that if you go to the ISS, you're definitely in space.
Okay, great. Thank you. Our next question comes from Joey Roulette of The Verge.
Hey, thanks. This question's for anyone who can answer it. How will the pricing terms change for future Axiom missions? Will all of them be subject to the 2019 terms? And for Michael, for AX-1, how much will each passenger pay in total for this whole mission? And is there any possibility that the science work that they're going to do on the space station give them any kind of discount on the cost of getting there? Thanks.
Let's see, I can answer the latter question. I guess NASA should talk about how the pricing policy might change going forward. We don't generally talk about the specific payments that our customers make. It's been widely reported numbers in the tens of millions, which I wouldn't argue with, but we generally don't talk about the specific pricing. These individuals go into orbit want to do something meaningful, and so the research programs that they sort out are theirs to do. In the case of these three, the research that's being done is not necessarily in collaboration with us, and so in terms of a discount, that really didn't really come up. Now, in the case where a private astronaut does something for us on orbit, that's a case where there would be, for instance, possibly the use of crew time. And in those cases, of course, we would work it out. But in this case, all three of the crew have a program they want to go do. They've been working very closely with the entities that Michael mentioned, and we have been working very closely with them to help integrate that and put the procedures and plans in place for them. But those efforts are really done based on their desire to do meaningful things on orbit.
And then real quick to answer the other part of the question, excuse me, the new pricing policy affects any private astronaut mission after the AX-1 mission, as you noted. Axiom Space submitted their proposal and the agency reviewed and approved at a negotiated pricing based on the 2019 pricing policy, but any future missions that are approved to any private astronaut mission contractor, including Axiom, will use the new pricing policy.
Okay, great. Thank you for that. Next question comes from Alan Boyle of GeekWire.
Thank you. Could Mike Suffredini, you mentioned that that by the third mission, you hope to be much more self-sufficient. Could you refresh my memory on the cadence of Axiom missions, and then if someone from NASA wanted to address the current thinking on the number of private astronaut missions? I think that there was a discussion. The figure that's been mentioned is 2 per year. If you could update me on what the plan is, and are you already thinking about the second mission? I know you want to concentrate on AX-1, but just to set the context, I'd really appreciate hearing about that. Thank you.
Yeah, certainly. So, of course, we have to make arrangements with launch providers and ISS for each of our flights. We would like to fly the cadence about, roughly twice a year. It probably works out to once every 7 months or so. But again, both the SpaceX and Boeing vehicles have to be available, and ISS has to be available. There's quite a bit of traffic to and from ISS, as you know. We add to that traffic. There's only 2 docking ports, so it's really tight. So that's one aspect of it, is port availability to come. The other aspect of it is we are not the only peas in the pod, so NASA has to work out a way for us to compete for each of the available slots. So you might have noticed NASA just put something out to have us, compete or talk about what we would do on a mission, and so we go through that process. So we're prepared to fly on a cadence about twice a year, but like everyone, we have to compete for the opportunity, and while we've got things lined up for our next 3 flights, AX-2, 3, and 4, we still have to work with NASA to figure out exactly when those flights can come to the ISS. Part of what is unique about us, of course, is last year we won the opportunity to attach the International Space Station and build out our space station. And so as Phil said, one of the aspects of this is how does whatever we're doing flight to flight further NASA's cause. And of course, one of NASA's causes is the commercialization of space. It's actually been in the charter since the beginning of NASA, actually. And so we think what we do really does help push the commercialization space aspect of it. So we think we're unique in that regard, and are optimistic we'll get flights at a rate that supports our customer base. I hope I said that in a way not to overexceed what NASA has agreed to, but we'll see what our NASA friends say.
No, that was an excellent response, Mike. Just to clarify just a few things, we're working really closely with the ISS program to identify those opportunities. It is our goal to offer up to 2 PAMs per year. We have recently updated the ISS NRA Focus Area 4 that provides the process for requesting private astronaut missions. And as part of that, we will be doing calls for proposals for those missions in a standard proposal evaluation process. You can read more on that in the ISS NRA. And so as Mike mentioned, up to 2 missions per year is our goal, and we are working to coordinate and identify those next opportunities in the very near future.
Thank you, Angela. And for those of you who don't know, the NRA is the NASA Research Announcement Focus Area 4, which you can find linked off of the nasa.gov/LEO-economy webpage, if you're looking for that. Okay, our next question comes from Eric Berger of Ars Technica.
Hi, good morning. Thanks for doing this. Question for Mike Suffredini. So Falcon 9 and Crew Dragon are now flying, and you don't want to talk about specific prices, I understand that. But I'm just wondering, Mike, if we're at a point where transportation to LEO for humans is enough to create a sustainable economic, activity, or does the cost of space need to come down more for that to become really viable? Obviously, having Crew Dragon is a huge step up, and Starliner will help as well. From 0 to 1 is a big step, but it's still quite a bit to get people up there, and I'm just wondering what's your sense of where the transportation prices need to go to really sort of make a sustainable presence in LEO for commercial activity. Thanks.
So, Eric, thanks for the question. So NASA, as Phil said, put this commercial crew program in place in order to make space more accessible. We're creating the next generation platform, so people have a place to go and view our Earth and also do meaningful work on orbit, take advantage of microgravity environment. The costs are very high today, as you know, and it takes a fairly you have to have a bit of liquid capital available to fly, and so it's a bit limited today, and it's an expensive business in general. But the more you fly, and the more competition you have over time, we would expect drives that down. It's not just the crew flights; it's the cargo flights as well. So over time, I expect the prices to come down. I expect prices to go up a skosh more before they start coming down. But I do expect them to come down. I think they'd have to come down dramatically for more people to fly. But I think you'll find there'll be other opportunities for individuals to compete for and have an opportunity to get to space in the near term. And then over time, as prices come down, more people will be able to fly. So it's really just going to be supply and demand. But there's still not much in the way of supply. I don't mean that. I mean, the spacecrafts are awesome, but there's just not a lot of flights available yet. And the demand is still growing. So we have a little ways to go before the pricing, I think, starts to come down. But you got to start somewhere, just like anything. And so we're where we need to be for today, and we're looking forward to flying a number of flights over time, more and more. I think we hope to have about 4 crewed flights to our platform a year later in the decade. So we're expecting a pretty good traffic pattern just to our space station, and we hope there are more over time that come to orbit. So we expect over time the prices will come down as demand goes up and supply becomes available. And but I don't see that in the next couple 3 years. We're probably a good almost decade away before it really gets dramatically cheaper. That's my sense anyway.
Thank you.
Yeah, I would just add, Eric, as you said, going from 0 to 1 is a pretty big deal, right? So it's cool that you're looking ahead, but let's not put that in our pocket so quickly, right? So the first time in human history, anybody who's wealthy enough and relatively fit can buy a ticket from a commercial organization utilizing a commercial capability and fly to space. First time in human history. As Dana said, if you wanted to do it before, you'd have to go on a Russian Soyuz vehicle. So that's huge in my mind. And my expectation is that this is now going to attract more entrepreneurs to this market, hopefully. And just like every mode of human transportation, it starts out high, right? Planes, trains, automobiles, if you look historically, they always start out high and then come down as entrepreneurs and business people enter the market. You get the forces of competition going. In my previous life before I joined NASA, I participated in a fairly in-depth survey of wealthy individuals and their desire to fly and their willingness to pay. We didn't see a knee in the curve in terms of prices at which demand really took off. It is basically sort of a linear curve. As prices come down, more people can afford to fly, and as they come down further, even more. So I think lower is better, and I'm going to do everything I can to get those prices down lower, but obviously industry is going to really have to step up. And as prices come down, more and more people are going to fly.
Excellent. Thank you. Our next question is from Isam Ahmed from the AFP.
Actually, Michael just really answered my question. I was going to ask, if you could spell out, just for members of the public who are wondering, obviously this initiative is going to stimulate the LEO economy, but you talked about serving humanity and democratizing spaceflight, and obviously these are very for high net worth individuals. How does this accomplish that goal? But I think Michael really just gave that good answer about that. I guess you see it as a sort of first step.
Yeah, I do, and something that that doesn't get mentioned too often, but it's worth saying is, yes, typically it takes an individual with more resources than the average person to be able to fly to space. But by and large, these individuals have an ability to affect all of our lives. So they own businesses, and all cases, they are globally oriented businesses. They have philanthropic initiatives that they believe in and invest in. And Mike L.A. can tell you better than I can, but I know from my time as ISS program manager, having talked to a lot of the astronauts that flew to space, including those that flew as quote-unquote tourists, that it's a moving experience to go to low Earth orbit. You look at the planet, you don't see borders, you see this very thin atmosphere protecting you, and you just realize how fragile the planet is and how it's not about countries and individual people. It's about, we all share this beautiful blue ball, and it's precious, and we can damage it if we're not careful. So I would expect that these individuals that fly, even though it's limited to folks that have a lot of resources, these folks can also make a positive impact for us as well too. They can invest in things and push their companies and create companies to try to tackle some of the challenges that we have in low Earth orbit. That we have here on this planet, including climate change. And so I don't think this is necessarily not just because these individuals have wealth, and you have to have wealth to get to orbit at least early on. I do think there's a positive impact for all of us when individuals like this fly because of the impact they can make when they get home, having had the experience.
Thank you. It's Michael López-Alegría. If I could just add, I'm having been there and obviously have a lot of colleagues that have been there, but significantly the non-professional astronauts that flew, as I mentioned, back in the 2000s, to a person come back slightly changed. And so this is why I think the democratization of space is so important. Of course, it's true that right now it's not very democratic. You have to be in a pretty select demographic to be able to afford it. But as Mike mentioned previously, we're all working to get the prices to come down. And I think if you follow the trend of costs in, for example, commercial aviation or pretty much any mode of transportation, they all start out high and come down. And so the experience that these folks will come away with, combined with the significant means of influence that they have at their disposal, I think is a win-win and sets us on a good course for the future. Thanks.
Thank you both. Our next question comes from Mark Carreau of Aviation Week and Space Technology.
Thank you. My question's for the mics. Can you tell us how many days this flight will span and how many of those days will be at the space station? In relation to that, can you sort of describe the theme of this mission? It sounds like there's going to be some research focus from each of your participants, but I wanted to sort of see or hear what you described that their purpose being.
I'll answer the first part and let L.A. cover the second. So we planned the mission as a 10-day mission, assuming up to a couple of days to get to ISS, and that just depends on launch day, as you know, Mark. So about 7 or 8 days on orbit, assuming that we can land on our planned departure date. If not, we'd end up staying a little bit longer to get a good weather landing spot. But we're planning total mission time to be about 10 days, about 7 or 8 days on orbit. And all those are abouts because depending on the day you launch will dictate when you actually arrive, as you know. And I'll let Mike answer the second question.
Yeah, Mark, I don't know that I'd say we have a theme, except that, as I mentioned in the open, everybody is really concentrating on trying to, improve humankind, and they're doing it each in their own specific way, teaming, if you will, with these research organizations to do science that, of course, organizations themselves are interested in, and then doing outreach back to their communities, whether they be educational, philanthropic, or others. So in the sort of thread to all of that is to, improve life on Earth. But each of them have sort of different focuses on their science, depending on, again, the interests of the organizations that they're partnered with.
Thank you.
Thank you. The next question is from Megan Bartels of Space.com.
Thanks so much for taking my question. It's for Michael López-Alegría. Could you talk more about the timeline for specific phases of training and about how many hours per week you and your colleagues will be spending together during each of those phases? And then I think it was mentioned that Axiom has hired a company to do that training. Could you share what that company is? Thanks.
Sure, Megan. Let's see. I think I mentioned the centrifuge training and zero-G flight that we'll be doing next week. In July, we are, the four of us are going on a camping trip together in the foothills in Alaska to do, some team bonding and leadership training. We are then the pilot of the mission, so we're adopting the same nomenclature as the shuttle used to use of commander and pilot. So the pilot, who's Larry Connor, and I will begin a week of training at SpaceX in July, in the same month as the outdoor trip. And then I start full-time training around August, and that's a mix of ISS and Crew Dragon stuff. Larry will start in September because he's got, the two of us have a little bit more volume of training to do because of our duties on the Crew Dragon. And then everybody will start in October. We'll be sort of Houston-based, making occasional trips to Hawthorne for training, but mostly focused on ISS systems. And I'd say it's about 2/3 ISS and 1/3 Crew Dragon training for the group. And then we'll enter quarantine, 2 weeks before launch, and off we go. Does that answer your question?
Yeah, thank you so much. Oh, and the company that's doing the training?
Sure, yeah. So we are using the same contractor that NASA uses to train its astronauts. So we'll be training on the same facilities with a syllabus that NASA has actually provided us. It's a reduced syllabus, obviously, from a professional astronaut, but it gets people to the point where they are able to operate safely on board the ISS unescorted. And so it's, it's kind of the obvious things you think about: how do you use the galley, how to use the toilet, how do you sleep, how do you use the communication system, et cetera. So those are the things we'll be focusing on ISS.
Great, thank you.
Okay, thank you. And next question is from Jeff Faust of Space News.
Good morning. Question for NASA. I'm curious what sort of interest you're seeing from companies other than Axiom for private astronaut missions, and would there be any consideration, given obviously the constraints of the traffic model and such, of allowing more than 2 private astronaut missions a year to the space station if there's sufficient demand? Thanks.
Angela?
Yeah, this is Dana. I'll answer the part about at least the traffic model to space station. And I think it was Mike Suffredini who touched on this before, but the vehicle has 2 docking ports and 2 berthing ports, and of course we've got a lot of traffic coming back and forth, both between our crewed vehicles, which use the docking ports, and then our cargo vehicles, which use a combination of both of those. And so if you were to look at our forecasted openings, slots where we actually have the docking port available for these private astronaut missions, about 2 is about all you can fit in there with the rest of the traffic.
Only other thing to add is we had talked about supply and demand earlier, and we are seeing a lot of interest in private astronaut missions, even outside of Axiom. And so at this point, the demand exceeds what we actually believe the opportunities on station will be. And it's part of the reason that we've updated the NRA process to make it a very clear, competitive process to ensure, this is such a limited resource and that we are evaluating all those proposals equally.
Okay, thank you. Thank you both, Angela and Dana. Next question comes from Miriam Kramer at Axios.
Hi, thank you so much. So I am curious if you guys could sort of tell us a little bit about how people can follow along with the mission. I know that since it's a sort of a private mission, I imagine there are going to be different constraints than, say, like an NASA astronaut mission to the space station. So I'm just sort of curious, like, is there going to be live coverage? Will it be continued coverage? Like, will it be inside the capsule? Like, I'm just wondering if you all have kind of thought about that. And this question is really for anybody who can answer it. So thank you.
Well, clearly it's in our best interest to be able to share as much of the mission as we can. We have not worked those details out yet, but we would like to make the launch and landing information available and their time on orbit to some degree available. And so we'll work that out over time. I believe all 3 of the crew members have been interested in doing downlinks as well during their mission. So anyway, the short answer is we haven't sorted that out yet, but we're very interested in sharing as much as we can, and so that will be our goal.
And of course, we'll be sharing on our websites and social media as well. So our next question comes from Kenneth Chang of the New York Times.
Thank you. This is for Angela Hart. The 2019 NASA initiative was to stimulate a range of commercial ventures, not just flying private astronauts. I guess I'm not aware of anything beyond the Axiom mission, so what, if any, ventures have been led by this initiative? And it seems that this repricing puts a big damper on them before they even get started. So what do you envision happening over the next couple of years on these commercial ventures beyond these twice-a-year trips of private astronauts? Thank you.
Thank you. There are actually a number of items that are ongoing. In the ISS NASA Research announcement that I mentioned earlier, Focus Area 4, there's also a Focus Area 3 that allows for commercial activities on ISS. There's a number of different microgravity commercial activities as well as advertising and marketing activities that have been ongoing. We have a number of items that have flown and or are in the queue today. The pricing for those activities has also been updated with the new pricing policy, and although we have seen some areas where that has impacted, we still have a number of new proposals coming in under the new pricing numbers, and so we feel that the market is going to be able to bounce back from that and will continue on. Additionally, as part of that, we, under the next step BAA, there are a number of initiatives. Axiom mentioned the commercial segment contract that they are part of. There are also, we also did a number of awards in in-space manufacturing to help push that demand area. And as you know, we are continuing in looking at ways to support investment in other commercial destinations to help to expand the supply in low Earth orbit as well.
And you can find the previous announcement about the Axiom Next Step BAA and the Demand Stimulation Awards on our website at nasa.gov/LEO-economy if you're looking for those. So our next question comes from Marcia Dunn of the Associated Press.
Yes, hello. I'm sorry I had to join a little late, so forgive me if this has already been answered. But will the private astronauts have free reign on the space station, or will they be limited to U.S. property? I'm thinking Columbus, Kibo. What about the Russian side? And the Russians also have their own plans to fly private citizens. So if the Russians are filming movies or doing whatever they're doing up there with privately purchased flyers, would Axiom or anyone else be allowed to simultaneously have their own private mission going, or will you try to separate these private missions out on the Russian side? Thanks.
That's a great question. The plans for these private astronauts, the base plan is that we're working both with ESA and JAXA so that the entire U.S. OS is available together. So when Mike L.A. talked about training before, part of that involves a small amount of training to become familiar with both the GEM and the Columbus modules, and so that's where all of the primary activities are on the full U.S. segment. In terms of agreements with the Russians, that's kind of worked on a case-by-case basis depending upon what the mission entails. And this is similar to what we've done in the past with Russians with spaceflight participants. So, for example, if they have a desire to come to the U.S. segment, we'll have a discussion about the activities they're interested in, and then we'll discuss specific training and agreements that would need to be in place to do that. And so that's the same method we're using in return with private astronauts going into the Russian segment. If there's interest on Axiom's parts, agreements would be made with the Russians to come up with base training and the agreements for activities. But outside of that, the crew on board is certainly welcome to invite other crew members over, whether they're sharing a common meal. They will be escorted by our crew if there aren't other arrangements in place, for example, like with the Russian segment.
Well, would you try to avoid the times that the Russians have their own private missions? And for Mike Suffredini, have your clients expressed an interest to go to the Russian side in January?
Let's see, I'll take the first part of that. As it happens to turn out, our windows don't overlap. I don't know that we would really specifically need to avoid those windows. The vehicle itself is capable of handling that number of crew. So we've not specifically talked about avoiding windows when the Russians have a spaceflight participant, but the way the flight planning lays out, those opportunities don't end up aligning with each other. And I'll let Mike take the rest of that.
So as was mentioned, it's really kind of up to us to work the relationships. We do have to do a certain amount of training, safety training, which is not quite as involved as it had been in the past, but our crew members would like to be able to at least spend a little time in the entire space station, including the Russian segment. So we will work those arrangements with Roscosmos to make sure that we have the appropriate opportunity and whatever training is required as well. The thing to keep in mind is we fly a professional astronaut on all these flights, so only 3 of the seats are paying seats, but we do that because, as you guys know, Michael is very experienced. He commanded the ISS. He's been to space several times. And so that, and he holds the EVA record. So that experience is what helps ensure that our crews can operate independently and safely from the rest of the ISS crew, but it also gives all the partners a certain amount of comfort that that if we are in each of these in their elements, that we'll be safe and careful. So that's an expense we bear to ensure mission success and safety of the crew and the ISS and her crew, and it's what will likely allow us to be able to have excursions into the Russian segment, which I must say, though, we have to finish those discussions. We started them at the Soyuz launch, and we'll sort them out over the next month or so, which it'll result in telling us what training we need to do, and then we'll work out how to get the crew there for that training if necessary.
Okay, thank you. Unfortunately, that's all the time we have today for questions. I know there are more reporters in the queue. We weren't able to get to your questions. Feel free to email those to me, and we'll follow up with you as best we can. Now I'll go back to Phil for any closing remarks.
Thanks, Stephanie, and thanks, everybody, for participating in the telecon today. We really hope that you continue to stay engaged with this mission and other missions to the International Space Station. And also just wanted to reiterate something I said in the beginning. This really is the first time that we're doing this. It's complicated with the partnership that we've got and the International Space Station being multilateral. And so we're going to have to figure out some things, and we may not have all the answers to everything today. A number of our answers were, well, we got to figure that out because, like I said, this is the first time. And you may get that answer on several questions as we go forward. But we are going to knock all those down, and we, again, look forward to your participation going forward. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Phil. And now we'll take closing remarks from Michael Suffredini.
I'll echo what Phil said. Thank you guys very much for your time today and your interest in what we're doing. This is a remarkable journey that began some time ago for us and result in a launch in January, no earlier than January 2022. Also, as Phil said, we have a lot in front of us to do, and so you will all learn more as we go forward, and we look forward to sharing it with you as we conduct the first commercial mission to the International Space Station. Thank you guys very much.
Thank you to Phil McAlister, Angela Hart, and Dana Weigel from NASA, and to Michael Suffredini and Michael López-Alegría from Axiom Space, and to all of those who are listening today. We appreciate your interest in the efforts of NASA and private industry to expand access to space. Learn more about NASA's work to enable a robust low Earth orbit economy, and stay tuned for mission updates at nasa.gov/LEO-economy. A replay of this teleconference will be available in about an hour, and you can listen to that replay by dialing 203-369-3391. Again, that number is 203-369-3391. Thank you all for joining us, and have a great day.
That concludes today's conference. Thank you for participating. You may disconnect at this time.